Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, obviously, we had the 3.24 league announcement this morning, and there is a lot going on. Some good, some bad, some absolutely fantastic, i.e., tattoos are now back into Path of Exile. Now, a couple of things. We did lose Wandering Path on the Atlas tree, but that's okay because they've sort of buffed up other nodes according to the patch notes. Mouse button 1 is gone, bone armor is gone. That is a little bit questionable, but hey, we got other stuff to compensate for that. Now we do have new automation gems, which I'm not entirely sure about, but we'll figure those out as we go. And I have a sneaking suspicion I'll end up playing with the new Warcry or Call to Arms gems as well to automate Warcries, which sort of seems like it'll be pretty cool. Now, the other big thing, and we were all worried about this, is now the power for Ralakesh boots did not get taken away at least. But we did lose 30% movement speed, so do with that what you will. Not exactly the best thing to happen to Ralakesh, considering just how much it was used last league. But hey, we can work around that and find other alternatives. So, in response to the patch notes, I've had a pretty good look through at this stage and managed to find some builds that could give you some ideas on what to play. And there's a good spread of all different sorts of skills. There's a few melee skills in here. There's a delver in here, obviously. There's also a bow skill and a caster skill in here, which all should be pretty consistent. Try to avoid trying to find builds that use trans gems initially, just to make this easier because you're not going to have those available straight away. And we'll also do a second list as well, and maybe even a delve list. And if people really want an SSF list, I'll do one of those too. Anyway, let's get into the video and have a look at 5 possible or good builds that you could league start with in the 3.24 league. Okay, so the first build on this list is going to be the Lightning Strike Champion by Fuzzy Duckzy. Now, the reason why I'm putting this build on this particular list is because I've put at least one build on these lists for the last few leagues from Fuzzy because he just makes very rock-solid guides with an overarching amount of abundant positive feedback from the community. So the builds are tested and they do have good feedback. He services the builds on his channel as well, so I'll put all the links in the description so you can check out the build and all the information behind it. Now, he's done a pre-league test run, and the best part about it is it's relatively budget. The gear that he's got in his POB is very achievable, especially at the very early point of the league. Does get to about 123,000 effective hit pool, which is pretty good for an early league start character with a little bit of time investment under it, up to level 94. Now, the other thing he also has in his build is a Perseverance, Evasion, and Armor setup, which early on is a really easy way to build highly stacked defenses to deal with clearing maps and whatnot. That being said, check out his build. He does cover off on a number of points around how the build's leveled off through to his clear goals. He does provide clear expectations of the build. And as an overall, it's just nice to put a champion build in one of these lists. Anyway, this would be the first build that I'd recommend for the 3.24 league that you could check out for your league start. Now, the next guide I'm going to feature is actually one of mine. And it's my take on the Boneshatter Juggernaut. In particular, the two-handed Boneshatter Juggernaut. Now, the reason why this build's pretty good, number one, easily scales. Absolutely easily scales. Very easy to gear initially as well, using Tanuahi gloves. Generally, they drop all throughout the campaign. I couldn't tell you how many times they dropped for me last league. And the other big advantage is you get a huge tanky buff from Boneshatter, in particular with the use of the Jug, just based on the untiring node. Now, my guides in particular for this one that I'll put in a link in the description was basically a act by act leveling guide provided with a POB for every single act that you'd complete, with day 1 5-link setup gearing, and then day 2 POB 6-link setup gearing, which would take you through into about 4 to 450 depth delve. Now, I did service this build last league as well and provided build updates, which you can use, and nothing's changed. Nothing's been done to Boneshatter in the patch notes. So this build is very much still very viable for this next league coming. I can't think of any other gear within the build as well where there would be any major issues. It doesn't use Ralakesh or anything like that. Now, that being said as well, the other advantage of running Boneshatter is not only is a good early league build, it's a build that can continually be progressed further so that you can keep pushing down in lower tiers and depths of delve if you're, of that proclivity. I definitely was. And so this build has a lot of potential to grow to a very endgame build. and start very easily within the campaign, and acts as well when you're initially leveling up. Anyway, I'll put a link in the description to all the videos for this build and the leveling guides. And yeah, if you're looking for a melee build, then this is probably another good option that you can exercise. Super tanky, super easy to play, tried and trusted every single league. Now there's an argument that Slayer's really good. My stance is Jug is the only way. Okay, so the third build that I'm going to feature here is actually the Explosive Trap Trickster by Fearless Dumbo. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to put a trapper in this build is I did give a go to trappers being lightning trappers, and it just didn't work out. Though, from Fearless's video, he's actually been playing this build for a large number of leagues and has serviced it for a number of leagues. And the other big advantage here is also Explosive Trap of Shrapnel has had a pretty significant buff in the patch notes as well, which could be worth checking out. Now, some advantages to his build in particular, it doesn't use Sunblast like every other trapper build that's out there. The Trickster, I find, is a hell of a lot tankier and easier to achieve a early level of tankability than the Saboteur. The Saboteur really struggles when you start to get into early maps to keep up, whereas that's just not an issue with the Trickster, as well as the high level of mobility. Now, the initial damage on the build's really good as well. That's the other big advantage of this particular build from Fearless. Now, beyond that point, he's also got a POB that gives you access to an early mapping variant of the POB on a 5-link setup, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 7, and then late maps, so he has a full endgame serves variation of the build as well. And beyond that, his guide has a extremely comprehensive amount of information around every element of the build through to using or how it deals with self-chill, you know, why it's not using Sunblast, mana cost management, Guardian's Blessings, essentially anything and everything that you might need to sort of unpack and unwind how the build should work or could work. He's provided explanations for, and also a min-max guide from 3.22. Now, as an overall, this is just a rock solid guide, really consistent build variant, and is also one that a lot of people were testing at the end of 3.23, leading into the next 3.24 league, so definitely worth having a build that I'm going to feature in this listing for now until we potentially do a second one, because I've got even more coming. Is the Wave of Conviction Elementalist, in particular my variant of the Wave of Conviction Elementalist. Now, there are two ways to look at this particular build. You could look at it as a transitional build for something bigger and better, or, you know, the same but bigger and better. In particular, if anyone follows my channel, I'm currently working on a League Starter guide for Purifying Flame Elementalist, which uses fundamentally the same setup, just a change to Purifying Flame of Revelations, which is really cool, but I'm not recommending that as this particular item yet. I haven't finished the guide for that. But more or less, I always go through and make it worst case scenario, assume that you're not going to have any drops, assume that basically you're going to get absolutely punched around by the game in the very early leveling to come up with a League Starter guide that will more or less work for any player if they were to pick it up. Now, the best part about this build is Wave of Conviction starts to really scale very well after about around Act 3 or 4. And then by the time you get to early mapping, you're pretty much just punching your way through everything in the game. Ignite is extremely strong once you get Shaper of Flames on the Elementalist. Now, this starts with a leveling variation of the build. Now, this takes it to basically T5 maps with almost no gear. And then beyond that, it has a mid-tier leveling tree, which basically takes you through. It starts to build up things like spell suppression, more defense, all that sort of good stuff. And then beyond that, I also included a full endgame tree, which goes into Chaos Inoculation, big ignite damage, as well as big defense as well. Now, beyond that point, I've also included in this particular guide a transitional move to the Black Flame Detonate Dead Elementalist, which was from my one of my previous league builds, which was an absolutely fantastic build. I think I pushed down to about 800 depth, no sweat with that. And then beyond that, I've also retested this build this league in particular and figuring out how to run Purifying Flame, and it absolutely worked in every expectation I could have anticipated from an SSF standpoint. So to this day, still really good. As far as the patch notes go, there was no change to the actual build in the patch notes. They didn't touch Wave of Conviction at all, or even any of the appended items that would go into the build realistically. So it is still very playable, very easy to pick up and run with. And I think I did see on Twitch some other people doing some level testing as well around Wave of Conviction Elementalist. It's just a really solid build. Honestly, Ignite is just so good in this game. Anyway, this would be the fifth build that I'm going to recommend that you should maybe have a look at for your League start if you're a bit stuck right now in trying to figure out what you're going to play. Okay, so hopefully this list gives you a bit of an idea of what you could look at from a League start scenario. Now, I'll probably make this comment that there is no one particularly perfect build for League start. The perfect build is a build that works for you, that you find fun, and sometimes they're a faster build, sometimes they're a slower build. It just really depends on who you are as a player for Path of Exile at the end of the day. And so generally I don't put titles on these videos as like the best builds or whatnot, because I think good solid League starters are a better indication of a build that will work out further down the track than trying to oversell something that may not work for, 40% of the other players in the game and only work for 60% of the players. Anyway, if you like this video, don't forget to like and sub to the channel. Don't forget to follow the Twitch. I stream on there a lot. You guys should follow me on there. Don't forget to follow the Twitter, or X as it's called now. And anyway, until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.